There is a moment in every person's life when chaos becomes too loud to ignore. It presses on the mind, weighing down the spirit, whispering that something has gone off balance. We sense it not because the world has suddenly become disordered, but because the inner world, our true realm of power, has become cluttered with unattended duties, forgotten intentions, and unresolved conflicts. It is in this moment that a simple truth emerges. Life does not organize itself. We must force ourselves to bring order, or we will be consumed by the very chaos we allow to grow. To organize your life is not merely to clean your room, arrange your schedule, or delete the files that crowd your screen. These are surface rituals. The real act of organizing life begins when you confront the inner forces that resist structure, the impulses that seek comfort over discipline, distraction over purpose, reaction over intentionality. There is a part of you that wishes to drift, that avoids certainty, that hides from responsibility, because responsibility demands transformation, and transformation asks for the courage to face the parts of yourself you prefer to overlook. When you force yourself to organize your life, you are not suppressing your nature. You are reclaiming it. You are saying to yourself, I refuse to be governed by my lower impulses. Instead, you decide to rise, to direct your energies toward creation rather than depletion. Order is not a cage, it is the foundation upon which freedom stands. A life without structure becomes a storm without a center, a fire without a hearth. To organize your life is to give your potential a home where it can grow without being scattered by every passing distraction. There is a reason so few are taught this secret. Organizing one's life requires a confrontation with the shadow. It reveals how often we use chaos as an excuse, how frequently we blame circumstance, instead of acknowledging our own abandonment of self-authority. It forces us to recognize the hidden truth that our environment reflects our psyche. When the desk is in disarray, the mind is often in disarray. When our time is unaccounted for, our intention is unanchored. When our habits drift into inconsistency, our identity slips into fragmentation. To organize your life is to face the mirror without illusions. Those who succeed in any domain, whether art, business, relationships, or spiritual growth, do not succeed because of luck. They succeed because they create structures that allow their strengths to flourish. They build daily rituals, cultivate inner discipline, and arrange their world so that their purpose cannot be easily forgotten. They understand that a chaotic life consumes energy, while an organized life amplifies it. They know that clarity emerges through deliberate action, not wishful thinking. But organization is not a one-time event. It is a continual act of renewal, a daily conversation with yourself in which you reaffirm your values, realign your priorities, and recommit to your path. It is the practice of noticing where entropy has begun to creep in and taking immediate action before it deepens into disorder. It is the ongoing willingness to evaluate what truly matters and to discard what no longer serves your growth. To force yourself to organize your life is to take back authorship of your story. The world will always tempt you with diversions, noise, and the illusion that everything can wait. But life does not wait. Opportunity does not wait. Purpose does not wait. The parts of you that long for fulfillment cannot bloom in a field overrun by weeds. They need space, sunlight, and intentional cultivation. Self-organization is the act of clearing the field so that something meaningful can grow. And when you finally bring order to your life, not perfect order but conscious order, you discover that success is never the product of motivation alone. It is the result of consistent, structured action taken over time. It is the outcome of refusing to let your life drift into randomness. It is the fruit of standing firm against your own internal chaos and saying, I choose direction. In the end, the secret no one teaches is that success begins long before achievement. It begins in the quiet decision to discipline your inner world. It begins in the moment you decide that your life deserves organization and that your future deserves intention. It begins when you recognize that the external world only becomes clear when the internal world is brought into harmony. Force yourself to organize your life, and you will discover that the path you once believed was hidden was simply waiting behind the clutter you had yet to clear. True organization begins within, not in the external world. This is a truth that few understand, because the world constantly teaches us to look outward for solutions, to believe that success clarity and peace are found in rearranging objects, adjusting schedules, or following external systems prescribed by others. Yet these external adjustments, while sometimes helpful, are superficial unless they mirror an inner alignment. The mind, when unorganized, projects its disorder onto the environment, creating a world that feels chaotic, overwhelming, and fragmented. We might spend hours cleaning our desk, aligning our calendars, or meticulously planning a project. Yet, if our internal state remains turbulent, the external order quickly collapses, and we are left feeling frustrated, lost, and unable to grasp the thread of our own intention. The internal world, the hidden realm of thoughts, impulses, emotions, and subtle inclinations, is the true canvas upon which life is painted. It is the origin of clarity or confusion, purpose or aimlessness. Until this inner world is examined, understood, and arranged, any attempt to impose order externally is like drawing a pattern on water, temporary, insubstantial, and ultimately ineffective. To organize the inner world is not merely to control thoughts or suppress impulses. It is rather to understand their origin, to observe them with a steady gaze, and to learn which patterns serve the self and which patterns sabotage growth. Every feeling, every habitual reaction, every recurring thought carries with it a signal, a clue about an area of life that requires attention, a part of the self that is neglected, misunderstood, or denied. True internal organization begins with self-awareness, the willingness to look deeply into the corners of consciousness that are often ignored or feared. It requires recognizing that avoidance, procrastination, and distraction are not merely external problems but expressions of internal fragmentation. When one habitually delays a task or seeks comfort over challenge, it is the inner disorganization revealing itself. When anxiety or confusion dominates decision-making, it is the lack of inner alignment making itself known. The process of internal organization is not always comfortable. It asks of us a kind of courage that is rare in ordinary life, the courage to confront the shadow aspect of the self, the hidden fears, insecurities, and unacknowledged desires that resist order. It requires honesty not just in the intellectual sense, but in the visceral sense of acknowledging the truth of one's feelings and motivations, even when they are inconvenient, painful, or shameful. This honesty is the first step in creating a foundation for a life that is both coherent and directed. When the internal world is observed without judgment, patterns begin to emerge. One notices, for example, how certain thoughts always lead to procrastination, how certain emotional triggers create disorientation, and how certain habitual reactions repeat in cycles that prevent growth. Recognizing these patterns is the precursor to reshaping them, and reshaping them is the act of creating internal order. Internal organization also requires intention. Awareness alone is insufficient. It must be coupled with deliberate action, a commitment to redirect energy toward constructive habits, to align actions with values, and to cultivate consistency in thought and behavior. It is in this commitment that the inner world begins to mirror the structure that is so often sought externally. Each decision to act intentionally, to respond rather than react, and to prioritize meaning over distraction strengthens the internal architecture of the mind. Over time, this internal structure produces a sense of stability, clarity, and resilience that cannot be achieved through external means alone. The external world becomes less threatening because it no longer mirrors an inner chaos. Tasks are approached with clarity, relationships with discernment, and opportunities with readiness. The role of reflection is essential in this process. Reflection is not mere daydreaming or idle contemplation. It is the disciplined examination of one's inner process, the regular turning of attention inward to assess alignment between thought, feeling, and action. Through reflection, one identifies inconsistencies, acknowledges neglected aspects of the self, and considers adjustments necessary for balance. It is through this ongoing process that the inner world is gradually organized, like a garden where weeds are removed, soil is enriched, and seeds are planted with care. Without reflection, the mind remains unexamined, and disorder persists unnoticed, subtly influence every choice, every reaction, and every sense of fulfillment or dissatisfaction. Organization of the inner world also entails the integration of different facets of the self. Each person contains multiple dimensions, rational, emotional, intuitive, and instinctual, that often conflict or compete for dominance. When these dimensions operate in isolation, life feels fragmented, decisions may feel inconsistent, actions disconnected, and identity uncertain. Internal organization requires the reconciliation of these aspects, the alignment of rational thought with emotional truth, of instinct with reason, and of conscious goals with unconscious desires. This integration does not happen automatically. It is a deliberate, sometimes arduous process requiring attention, courage, and patience. When achieved, it produces a profound coherence in the self, a sense that the inner world is a unified organism rather than a battlefield of competing forces. Furthermore, the inner world is deeply connected to time and attention. A disorganized mind scatters attention across multiple directions simultaneously, creating a sense of overwhelm and incapacity. Internal organization involves learning to direct attention with precision, to choose which thought, tasks, and intentions deserve focus, and to release the distractions that fragment the psyche. It is the cultivation of mental space where clarity can arise, where creativity can flourish, and where decisions are made from strength rather than confusion. Just as an unkempt room distracts and depresses, an unorganized mind exhausts and paralyzes. Attention is the currency of internal order, and learning to spend it wisely is a cornerstone of organizing one's inner life. The benefits of internal organization manifest in all areas of life. External tasks are executed with greater efficiency because the mind is clear and deliberate. Relationships deepen because the individual is more present, aware, and authentic. Opportunities are recognized because the internal landscape is attuned to the subtleties of timing and significance. Stress diminishes not because circumstances have changed, but because the individual possesses an internal framework that supports calmness, discernment, and adaptive response. Creativity, insight, and personal growth flourish because the mind is not fragmented by internal clutter but directed with intention toward meaningful expression. Finally, internal organization fosters a sense of empowerment. The person who organizes their inner life experiences less susceptibility to the whims of external events, less dependence on approval, and less vulnerability to distraction. They carry within themselves a stable center, a place from which choices arise consciously rather than reactively. This center is not rigid or unyielding. It is flexible, adaptive, and responsive. But it is grounded in a coherent understanding of self, clarity of values, and an alignment of intentions. It is this inner order that becomes the foundation upon which the external life can be constructed, directed, and sustained. With purpose and fulfillment, chaos grows when we avoid responsibility, and order grows when we confront ourselves honestly. This principle is not merely a matter of practical efficiency. It is a reflection of the fundamental nature of the human psyche. Chaos is not simply the absence of order. It is the consequence of neglecting the self, of turning away from the truths that reside in the inner world, of allowing impulses, fears, and unresolved conflicts to operate unchecked. When we evade responsibility, whether in small matters or in the grander arcs of life, we create pockets of disorder within the mind, which then manifest outwardly in behaviors, circumstances, and relationships. Every unkept promise, every postponed decision, every suppressed emotion accumulates as a form of internal clutter, and this clutter inevitably shapes the landscape of our existence. It is subtle at first, a sense of tension, occasional indecision, fleeting anxiety, but if left unattended, it grows into a pervasive disorder that colors every experience with unease and distraction. Avoidance of responsibility often masquerades as rationality or comfort. We tell ourselves that we are too busy, too tired, or too incapable to address certain obligations or confront certain truths. We distract ourselves with trivial pursuits or immerse ourselves in the opinion and expectations of others to avoid facing our own neglected areas. Yet every act of avoidance strengthens the grip of chaos. The unexamined obligations, unspoken truths, and delayed decisions create tension within the psyche, and tension within the psyche generates a subtle yet persistent pressure on perception and behavior. We begin to notice how easily our attention scatters, how often tasks remain unfinished, how frequently indecision dominates our lives. The external disorder is merely a mirror of the internal one, and the first step toward clarity is always inward. Confronting oneself honestly is the antidote to this chaos. To confront oneself is to engage in an unflinching examination of motives, fears, habits, and patterns. It requires a willingness to admit where one has faltered, to recognize where one has allowed laziness, fear, or distraction to dictate action, and to take ownership of the consequences. This confrontation is not an act of self-punishment but of profound courage. It is the acknowledgement that growth cannot occur in denial, and that the forces of disorder thrive precisely in the absence of accountability. Honest self-confrontation allows the mind to map the terrain of its own inner world, to identify where chaos resides, and to determine which aspects of life require deliberate attention. Without this honesty, attempts at organization, achievement, or transformation are superficial at best, temporary at worst, and the cycles of frustration, distraction, and dissatisfaction persist. Responsibility, when embraced, generates order in ways that may initially seem subtle, but are profound in their cumulative effect. When one decides to take responsibility for thoughts, actions, and emotions, one begins to act from a place of conscious intention rather than reactive impulse. Each small decision to address a neglected task, to speak an unspoken truth, or to face an uncomfortable feeling strengthens the capacity for internal coherence. These moments accumulate, creating a network of accountability within the self that support focus, consistency, and resilience. The individual learns to recognize the consequences of choices, to anticipate the impact of inaction, and to shape life according to values and purpose, rather than circumstance or habit. In this way, responsibility functions as a bridge between the inner and outer worlds, translating internal clarity into effective, meaningful action in the external realm. Avoidance, on the other hand, allows chaos to expand unchecked. Every unresolved issue, unaddressed conflict, and postponed decision functions as a seed of disorder. The mind cannot compartmentalize indefinitely. Unresolved matters continue to exert influence in subtle, often unconscious ways. Emotions may become unpredictable, attention scattered, and motivation inconsistent. Tasks that could have been accomplished with ease become obstacles. Relationships falter because of unspoken resentment or neglected duties. Opportunities are missed because hesitation or fear delays action. The accumulation of these small acts of avoidance forms a web of disorder that entangle the individual, making it increasingly difficult to regain clarity and control. Chaos, when allowed to grow, is self-reinforcing, feeding on procrastination, distraction, and denial until it becomes a pervasive pattern that dominates life. The cultivation of honesty and responsibility is therefore not a one-time event but a continuous practice. Life presents challenges, distractions, and tests of will at every turn, and the psyche is never perfectly organized. Continuous vigilance, reflection, and adjustment are required to maintain internal order. Daily practices such as mindful attention to thoughts, careful evaluation of priorities, and consistent follow-through on obligations reinforce the inner architecture of the mind. When these practices become habitual, chaos is less likely to accumulate because the individual is consistently aligning actions with values, intentions, and truths. Responsibility becomes a habitual lens through which life is approached, and order becomes a natural extension of conscious engagement with self and world. Internal chaos and avoidance of responsibility are often rooted in fear: the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, or the fear of confronting uncomfortable truths. To address these fears, one must cultivate courage and self-compassion. Courage allows the individual to face what has been neglected without retreating into excuses or distractions. Self-compassion ensures that this confrontation does not become self-destructive. It permits acknowledgement of imperfection while maintaining commitment to growth. The interplay of courage and compassion enables the individual to navigate the tension between confronting the shadow aspects of the self and fostering constructive change. It transforms responsibility from a burdensome obligation into a path of empowerment, demonstrating that internal order is not merely discipline but a form of liberation. The consequences of embracing responsibility extend beyond personal clarity. As the internal world becomes more coherent, the individual's capacity to influence the external world effectively increases. Decisions are made with foresight, communication becomes clearer, and actions carry intentional weight. Others respond to this clarity, trust is cultivated, and opportunities align with readiness. Order generated from responsible engagement with self becomes a magnet for coherence in life circumstance, demonstrating that internal organization is the precursor to meaningful success. The outer world, which once appeared unpredictable or overwhelming, becomes navigable because the individual has cultivated a center of stability from which to act, observe, and respond. Ultimately, the relationship between responsibility and chaos is a mirror of the human condition. Avoidance allows disorder to thrive, confrontation fosters structure, clarity, and potential. The challenge is not external, it is internal, and it requires the disciplined attention of the individual to map the landscape of their inner world, identify areas of neglect, and take consistent action toward alignment. The process demands courage, honesty, reflection, and deliberate practice. And it is through these efforts that life begins to exhibit coherence, meaning, and direction. Discipline creates the structure that allows potential to unfold into achievement. Discipline is often misunderstood as mere self-denial, rigid control, or adherence to external rules, but its essence is far deeper. It is the conscious alignment of inner energies, thoughts, and intentions in service of growth, purpose, and fulfillment. Without discipline, potential remains scattered, like seeds sown on rocky ground, unable to root, grow, or bear fruit. The mind, left to wander without direction, is easily seduced by distraction, comfort, and impulse. And in this wandering, the vast possibilities of the self dissipate into inertia. True discipline is the cultivation of an internal order that organizes energies, focuses attention, and channel efforts consistently toward meaningful ends, transforming latent capacity into realized achievement. Potential in every individual is immense, yet it is often hidden beneath layers of inconsistency, hesitation, and avoidance. Talents, insights, and creative impulses emerge spontaneously, but without a structure to support them. They flicker briefly and vanish. Discipline provides the scaffolding upon which potential can manifest, offering a framework within which the mind, body, and spirit can coordinate. It is not the suppression of spontaneity, but the guidance of it, like a river confined to a channel that allows water to reach its intended destination. Without discipline, energy diffuses in multiple directions, and the life of an individual resembles a storm, powerful but unfocused, impressive but ultimately unproductive. The development of discipline begins in the internal world, where self-awareness meets intention. One must first recognize the tendencies that led to distraction, procrastination, and inconsistency. These tendencies are not merely flaws, they are signals from the unconscious, highlighting the areas where energy has been misaligned or neglected. By observing them with honesty, one gains insight into the nature of resistance, the triggers of avoidance, and the patterns that undermine growth. Discipline is not imposed externally but cultivated internally through the conscious decision to act with intention despite resistance. Each act of deliberate focus, each moment of resisting distraction, strengthens the neural pathway of consistency, and over time, these repeated choices become the foundation of a disciplined mind. Structure arises naturally from this internal discipline. Daily rituals, intentional routines, and mindful organization of time and energy become not burdens but supports for the unfolding of potential. These structures are flexible, adaptive, and deeply personal, reflecting the unique rhythms, strengths, and goals of the individual. They provide a framework in which creativity can flourish, decision-making becomes clear, and actions are synchronized with purpose. Without such structure, Even the most gifted individuals struggle to transform insight into achievement. Brilliance alone is insufficient. It requires disciplined execution to convert potential into reality. Discipline bridges the gap between what one is capable of and what one actually accomplishes, translating promise into tangible result. Discipline also cultivates resilience. Life is unpredictable, and challenges, distractions, and setbacks are inevitable. A disciplined mind does not crumble in the face of adversity. It adapts, persists, and redirects energy toward meaningful objectives. By establishing internal order and consistent practice, one develops a capacity to withstand external turbulence without losing focus or momentum. This resilience is not born of rigidity but of alignment, the alignment of intention, action, and reflection that allows the individual to respond to obstacles with clarity and determination rather than panic or resignation. Discipline transforms obstacles into opportunities for growth by providing a stable internal framework from which to assess, adapt, and act. Another essential aspect of discipline is the management of attention. Potential cannot unfold if attention is scattered, fleeting, or diverted by trivialities. Discipline trains the mind to notice what is important, prioritize effectively, and sustain focus on tasks that yield meaningful progress. It develops the ability to resist the pull of immediate gratification in favor of long-term fulfillment. This cultivation of attention is the foundation of mastery, as repeated, deliberate engagement with significant tasks deepens skill, insight, and competence. Just as a sculptor must repeatedly refine each stroke to reveal the form within the stone, so too must the disciplined individual continually apply effort to bring latent potential into clear, observable reality. Discipline also involves the integration of intention and action. Many possess knowledge, skill, or vision, but without disciplined action, these remain unrealized. Knowledge alone does not create achievement. Insight without execution is wasted potential. Discipline ensures that actions are not haphazard or reactive, but aligned with long-term goals and meaningful objectives. It transforms abstract ideas into tangible outcomes and fleeting inspiration into sustained productivity. The disciplined mind evaluates each choice, aligning it with purpose, and consistently applies effort, gradually building momentum and compounding small successes into significant accomplishment. Importantly, discipline is intimately connected with self-trust. To act with discipline is to believe that the inner commitment to growth and purpose is worth honoring, even when external rewards are not immediate. It is the cultivation of faith in one's own ability to navigate challenges, manage impulses, and maintain focus. This self-trust is both a product and a reinforcement of discipline. As consistent action produces results, the individual gains confidence in their capacity to shape life consciously. With trust in oneself, discipline becomes less an act of obligation and more a natural extension of intention, a way of aligning the self with the unfolding possibilities of existence. The journey of discipline requires patience. Potential does not unfold instantaneously, it emerges gradually, shaped by repeated, deliberate effort over time. Each day of conscious action, each moment of resisting distraction, each reflection on priority contributes to the construction of a life that is coherent, directed, and powerful. The disciplined mind recognizes that setbacks are not failures but part of the process, and that persistence, reflection, and adaptation are essential components of growth. Discipline is the art of sustaining effort over time, of maintaining alignment in the face of chaos, and of consistently choosing the path that nurtures potential rather than succumbing to convenience or ease. Finally, discipline cultivates a profound sense of freedom. While it may seem paradoxical, structure and constraint within the mind create the conditions for genuine liberation. The individual who has cultivated internal order is no longer enslaved by impulse, distraction, or circumstance. Instead, they act from a place of intentionality, clarity, and coherence. Potential that was once dormant or scattered now flows freely, guided by purpose, focused attention, and consistent practice. The structure imposed by discipline does not confine but enables, providing a stable platform from which creative energy, insight, and achievement can expand. It is through discipline that potential ceases to be an abstract promise and becomes a living, realized expression of the self. Success is the result of consistent inner alignment, not momentary motivation. Motivation is fleeting, fragile, and often dependent on external circumstances. It rises with excitement, novelty, or promise, and vanishes when faced with difficulty, repetition, or discomfort. Relying on motivation alone is akin to attempting to cross a vast river on a fragile raft that appears only when the current is favorable. True success, however, is built upon a foundation that is independent of temporary impulse. It emerges from the alignment of thought, feeling, intention, and action over time. When the inner world is coherent, structured, and deliberate, the external world responds accordingly, and actions, decisions, and outcomes flow from a stable center rather than a shifting tide of desire. Inner alignment begins with awareness of self. One must recognize the forces, habits, and beliefs that govern daily life, both conscious and unconscious. Every thought, emotional response, and habitual behavior either supports or undermines growth. Consistency in alignment requires identifying these influences and discerning which are constructive and which are destructive. This is not an exercise in judgment or condemnation, but in observation and understanding. By honestly examining the ways one acts, reacts, and chooses, the individual cultivates insight into the forces that either propel them toward fulfillment or divert them toward stagnation. Without such clarity, efforts to achieve success are scattered, inconsistent, and ultimately unsustainable. Consistency in inner alignment is more than persistence. It is an active, deliberate process of harmonizing all aspects of the self. Values, goals, intentions, and actions must converge in a coherent system where each choice is informed by awareness of its impact on overall growth. Discrepancies between belief and behavior create tension, distraction, and wasted energy. For instance, one may aspire to mastery in a field, yet allow procrastination or fear to dictate daily practice. In such cases, the lack of alignment undermines progress, regardless of external motivation. True success requires that the inner voice, guiding principles, and concrete actions move together, forming a continuous flow that carries the individual toward intended outcome. One of the most critical aspects of inner alignment is the integration of conscious and unconscious processes. The unconscious mind carries patterns, habits, fears, and desires that influence decision-making, often without awareness. Ignoring these forces results in internal conflict, indecision, and behaviors that sabotage potential. Alignment requires engaging with these hidden aspects of the self, acknowledging their presence, and understanding their influence. This may involve reflection, contemplation, and self-observation, uncovering the subtle drivers of behavior and transforming them into allies rather than obstacles. By bringing the unconscious into dialogue with conscious intention, the individual achieves a more complete integration, allowing consistent action to emerge naturally from the totality of the self. Another dimension of inner alignment is the regulation of attention. The mind constantly encounters distractions, both external and internal, that compete for energy and focus. Without disciplined attention, even the most talented or motivated individual will scatter effort across inconsequential tasks, depleting energy from meaningful endeavors. Alignment requires learning to notice where attention drifts, to assess the significance of competing demands, and to intentionally direct focus toward actions that advance growth and purpose. This cultivation of attention is foundational for sustained progress, as repeated, deliberate focus accumulates into skill, knowledge, and competence that cannot be achieved through sporadic bursts of motivation alone. Emotions play a central role in alignment. The ability to acknowledge, regulate, and harness emotions is critical because unchecked emotional fluctuations can derail focus, consistency, and judgment. Anger, fear, doubt, or impatience, when unexamined, produce reactions that are misaligned with long-term objectives. Alignment does not demand suppression of emotion, but conscious engagement with it. By understanding emotional triggers and learning to respond with awareness rather than reactivity, The individual transforms emotions into instruments that support rather than hinder consistent action. Emotional intelligence, therefore, becomes inseparable from disciplined alignment, enabling one to navigate life's challenges without surrendering coherence to transient impulses. Habits are the externalized manifestation of inner alignment. When the mind, intention, and emotion converge consistently, behaviors solidify into patterns that support long-term growth. Habits are not merely routines, they are the embodied expression of repeated alignment, allowing effort to become almost automatic in service of meaningful goals. This is why success often appears effortless to outside observers. The individual has created a system in which actions naturally reflect intention and values. In contrast, inconsistent alignment produces erratic behaviors, wasted energy, and a sense of struggle even when motivation is high. The cultivation of aligned habits is therefore a cornerstone of sustained achievement, bridging the gap between inner coherence and tangible outcomes. Time is another element where inner alignment exerts its influence. Without alignment, time is easily wasted on trivial matters, reactive decisions, or inconsequential distraction. When alignment is cultivated, every choice regarding the use of time becomes deliberate, informed by awareness of priorities, goals, and long-term objectives. Productivity emerges not from frantic activity or forced effort, but from the directed flow of energy toward what is truly significant. Aligned individuals experience time differently, as each moment is recognized for its potential to advance growth, nurture skill, or deepen understanding. The management of time thus becomes an extension of inner alignment, a reflection of the coherence between intention and action. The role of reflection in maintaining alignment cannot be overstated. Life is dynamic, and circumstances, relationships, and internal states are constantly evolving. Regular reflection allows the individual to assess whether actions, habits, and intention remain in harmony, to identify areas of misalignment, and to make necessary adjustments. This reflective process transforms alignment from a static achievement into a continuous practice, responsive to change and resilient in the face of challenge. It ensures that inner coherence remains intact over time, supporting consistent action, even when motivation fluctuates or external conditions become unpredictable. Ultimately, consistent inner alignment creates a state in which success is a natural consequence rather than a forced outcome. Motivation, though useful as a spark, is insufficient to sustain growth, mastery, or achievement. Alignment, cultivated through awareness, discipline, integration of conscious and unconscious processes, regulation of attention and emotion, deliberate habit formation, and reflective practice, produces a coherent internal system from which effective, meaningful action flows. When alignment is present, the individual navigates life with clarity, confidence, and purpose, responding to challenges not as distractions but as opportunities to reinforce coherence, deepen skill, and advance toward goals. The unfolding of potential becomes inevitable, not because external circumstances are favorable, but because the internal world is organized, deliberate, and consistent.